It was supposed to be a quick road trip, just a few hours out of town to clear my head. I didn't even pack much, just the essentials, some snacks, a bottle of water and my old beat-up flashlight. I was aiming for that stretch of Route 6 that nobody talks about. The one people say is cursed, but nobody seems to know why. I was skeptical of course, but curious enough to see for myself. I'd been driving for about an hour, the highway dark and empty, when the rain started coming down hard. The kind of rain that makes you feel like you're driving through a waterfall, the wipers barely able to keep up. That's when I saw the sign, faded and cracked, barely legible. It just said, "Turn here." And I did. The road was narrow, flanked by dense woods that seemed to close in on me the further I went. My headlights pierced the dark, but just barely. I thought about turning around, but something urged me forward, deeper into the unknown. My phone had no signal, but that was to be expected out here. It was just me and the road. I kept driving for what felt like forever, the rain tapping like fingernails on the roof of my car. Then suddenly, there was a shape on the side of the road, a figure soaked to the bone, standing there with its back to me. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, but something about the way they stood, unmoving in the pouring rain, sent a chill down my spine. I slowed down, rolling my window down just a crack. "Hey, you need help?" I called out, but my voice seemed swallowed by the rain. The figure didn't move. Just stood there, head slightly bowed back to me. I felt an instinctive pull in my gut, a warning, like a whisper in my ear telling me to keep driving. I rolled the window back up and pressed the gas. My car crept forward, and I kept my eyes straight ahead, refusing to look back in the rearview mirror. That's when I heard it. A soft, muffled sound, like something scratching on glass. I turned, and my heart nearly stopped. There on the passenger side window, was a handprint, smeared across the glass, as if someone had pressed their palm hard against it and dragged it down. But there was no one outside. I glanced back at the road behind me, the figure was gone. A deep, unsettling fear rooted itself in my chest, but I kept driving. I told myself it was just the rain, maybe a trick of the light. I needed to find a place to turn around, a wider spot on the road. That's when I saw it, a gas station, old and abandoned. The kind you see in horror movies, with a flickering neon sign that read "Open," even though it clearly wasn't. I pulled in, hoping to catch my breath, maybe turn the car around in the parking lot. But as soon as I cut the engine, the headlights dimmed, and the car was plunged into darkness. The rain pounded harder, and I noticed something. The faint glow of a light coming from inside the gas station. I knew it made no sense, but the curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed my flashlight, opened the door, and stepped out into the rain. The cold soaked through my clothes instantly. I crossed the cracked pavement and made my way to the door. It was slightly ajar, creaking open with a soft push. Inside it was dark, but the light was coming from deeper in, behind a door marked "Employees Only." I should have turned back right then. I should have run back to my car and never looked back, but something pushed me forward. The door was heavier than it looked, and when I pushed it open, the light flickered. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, illuminating a small room cluttered with old papers, tools, and something else. In the corner, I saw it, a VHS tape, sitting on top of a dusty television set. The label on the tape was smudged and unreadable. For reasons I can't explain, I reached out, picked up the tape, and slid it into the player. The TV crackled to life, static filling the room with a low hum. The screen was black at first, and then, a figure appeared. It was a man, standing in the rain, just like the figure I had seen on the road. The footage was shaky, like it was shot from a handheld camera. The man turned slowly, his face hidden under a wide-brimmed hat. He began to walk, and the camera followed him, step by step, through the dark rainy night. My heart pounded as I watched, unable to look away. The man stopped, turned again, and stared directly into the camera. Into me. His face was pale, his eyes hollow, and his mouth smiled. And then, he spoke. "You shouldn't have stopped." The screen went black. And that's when I heard it. The sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming from the doorway behind me. I whipped around, my flashlight beam cutting through the dark, but there was nothing there. Just the door, slightly ajar, leading back into the rain. But the footsteps continued, louder now, closer. I didn't wait. I ran. I bolted out of the gas station and back to my car. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking, the rain blurring my vision. The footsteps were right behind me now, splashing through the puddles, getting closer. I finally got the key in the ignition and started the engine. I slammed the car into reverse, not caring if I hit anything, just needing to get away. The car lurched backward, and I turned it around, speeding back the way I came. The road was empty again, the rain pounding on the roof. I glanced in the rearview mirror, and for a second, I saw him. The man, standing in the middle of the road, smiling that same hollow smile. I drove faster, my heart racing, the road stretching endlessly in front of me. I don't know how long I drove, but eventually, the rain began to let up. The clouds parted, and I saw the faint glow of city lights in the distance. I made it back, but I'll never forget that road, that gas station, or the figure in the rain. I don't know who he was or why he was there. I don't want to know. But if you ever find yourself on Route 6, and you see a sign that says turn here, just keep driving. And whatever you do, don't stop. I made it back to the city just as dawn was breaking, the pale light chasing away the lingering shadows of the night. I pulled into my apartment complex, my hands still gripping the wheel tightly. I sat there, engine idling, trying to catch my breath. I wanted to believe it had all been some kind of twisted dream, that the rain and the darkness had played tricks on my mind. But I knew it wasn't. The damp seat beside me still bore a faint, smeared handprint, proof that whatever happened out there was very real. I finally got out of the car, locking it behind me as if that would somehow keep whatever I'd encountered at bay. I made my way upstairs, my soaked clothes clinging to my skin, and fumbled with my keys, desperate to be inside, away from the open air, away from any prying eyes that might still be watching me. Once inside, I threw off my wet clothes, tossed them in a pile, and headed straight for the shower. The hot water felt like salvation, washing away the cold, the grime, and some of the fear that had gripped me so tightly. But even the steam couldn't erase the image of that smiling face or the sound of those footsteps echoing behind me. After a while, I stepped out, dried off, and wrapped myself in a towel. I needed sleep, needed to forget. But as I passed by the mirror, I froze. There was something written on it, fogged up from the steam. 4 words clear as day. You shouldn't have stopped. My heart skipped a beat. I rubbed the mirror furiously, but the words remained, etched like a scar. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the edge of the bath mat. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking, and tried to call someone, anyone. But the line was dead, just a crackling static on the other end. I sat down on the edge of my bed, my mind racing. Maybe I was just exhausted, maybe I had written it myself in some half-dream state. I had to believe that. But then I heard it, another sound. A faint scratching, like nails on glass. I turned slowly, my eyes locking onto the window. There, just outside, was a handprint, smeared and dripping down the glass. It was impossible. I was on the 3rd floor. I rushed to the window, yanking the curtains closed, my breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be. I tried to calm myself, tried to think rationally. Maybe it was just a prank, some kind of weird coincidence. I needed to distract myself, do something, anything to take my mind off of it. So, I decided to go back to my car, check if there was any other sign, anything that could explain this. I grabbed my keys and headed back down to the parking lot. As I approached the car, my heart sank. The driver's side door was open. I knew I had locked it. I approached cautiously, my pulse pounding in my ears. I peeked inside, half expecting to find someone waiting, but it was empty. Then I saw it, the VHS tape. Sitting on the passenger seat. The same tape from the gas station. I picked it up, my hands trembling. There was something different about it now. The smudged label was gone. In its place, a new one had appeared, clear and bold. It read, "Play me." I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. I didn't want to take it inside, didn't want to play it, but I knew I had to. I had to know what this was, what was happening to me. I hurried back upstairs, tape in hand, and found an old VCR I'd forgotten I even owned, buried in the back of my closet. I hooked it up to the TV, all the while feeling like I was being watched, every shadow in my apartment seeming to stretch and grow. With a deep breath, I slid the tape into the player and pressed play. The screen flickered to life, static at first, and then darkness. The familiar crackle of old VHS tape filled the room. I sat down on the edge of my couch, my heart pounding. The screen remained black, the hum of static growing louder. Then, the image shifted, revealing that same stretch of road from the night before, the one where I had seen the figure standing in the rain. The footage was grainy, the camera shaky as it panned along the empty road. And there, in the middle of the frame, was my car. I recognized it immediately. The camera moved closer, zooming in on the driver's side window. The interior light flickered on, revealing me sitting inside, gripping the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. My breath caught in my throat. I watched myself on the screen, watched as I slowly turned my head to the side and looked directly into the camera. My face was pale, my eyes wide with terror. Then, my mouth moved. I couldn't hear what I was saying, but my lips formed 2 unmistakable words. "Don't stop." The screen went black again, and the tape clicked off. I sat there stunned, unable to move or breathe. This wasn't possible. How could I be on that tape? How could I have been filmed without knowing? And then, the TV flickered back on, the static roaring louder than before. The screen lit up, and there he was, the man with the wide-brimmed hat, standing in the rain, his face still wearing that same hollow smile. His lips moved, and this time, I heard him clearly. "This is just the beginning." The screen went black again, and the room was plunged into silence. I felt a cold hand grip my shoulder. I spun around, but there was no one there. The phone rang, cutting through the silence like a knife. I jumped, nearly dropping the remote. I picked it up, my voice shaking. "Hello." A voice on the other end, distorted, low, barely a whisper. "You shouldn't have stopped." The line went dead. And that's when I knew, I had only two choices. Keep running or find out who, or what was behind all of this. But deep down, I already knew there was no escaping. Not anymore. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, that smile, the rain, the road. I could still hear the low whisper on the other end of the phone, echoing in my ears like a relentless chant, "You shouldn't have stopped." The sun was just starting to rise, the faint light creeping through the blinds, when I made up my mind. I wasn't going to let this thing, whatever it was, haunt me like this. I had to go back to that road, back to that gas station. I had to find out what was going on. I packed a bag with the essentials, a flashlight, a few bottles of water, a first aid kit, and a tire iron, just in case. I slipped the VHS tape into my bag, not really knowing why, but feeling like I might need it. The drive back to Route 6 felt different this time. The sky was overcast, heavy with clouds that seemed to hang just above the treetops. I kept glancing at the road behind me, half expecting to see that figure standing there in the distance. But there was nothing. Just miles of empty highway. When I finally reached the turnoff, that faded, cracked sign was still there, "Turn here." I hesitated for a moment, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Then I made the turn. The road seemed even narrower than before, the trees pressing in on either side, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. The rain started again, slowly at first, then heavier, drumming on the roof of my car like 1,000 tiny fists. I could barely see, but I knew I was close. And then, there it was, the gas station. Just as I remembered it. The flickering neon sign, still stubbornly declaring "open." I pulled in slowly, my headlights cutting through the misty rain, and parked in the same spot as before. I got out of the car, and the moment my feet touched the ground, I felt it, that cold, creeping sensation, like 1,000 tiny spiders crawling up my spine. I steeled myself and moved toward the gas station door. It was closed this time, but as I reached out to push it open, it swung inward on its own, creaking like something out of a nightmare. Inside, everything was the same, dusty shelves, broken counter, and the employees' only door. The light behind it was still flickering, just like before. I walked slowly, each step echoing in the hollow space. I reached the door, and it felt heavier than it should have, like it was pushing back against me. I took a deep breath and shoved it open. The room beyond was dark, the single bulb overhead flickering weakly. But now, there were more VHS tapes. Dozens of them, stacked haphazardly around the room. Each one had a label, handwritten in the same jagged scrawl. I picked one up at random. The label read, "Last night." I felt my heart race. I grabbed another tape. Car. Another. Home. I realized with growing dread that these were tapes of me. I looked around, feeling exposed, as if I were being watched, but the room was empty. Just me and the tapes. My hands were shaking, but I couldn't stop myself. I had to know what was on them. I grabbed the tape labeled "Last Night" and put it in the old VCR. The screen flickered to life, showing my apartment building from the outside, the rain still falling. The camera zoomed in on a third-floor window, my window. I watched as the light in my room turned on, and I saw myself moving around, pacing back and forth. I saw myself look out the window, the same window where I had seen the handprint. The footage zoomed in closer, and I saw something I hadn't noticed before. Something standing just out of frame, barely visible in the shadow of the trees across the street. A figure, wearing a wide-brimmed hat. Watching. Waiting. I turned off the tape, my hands trembling. I was being watched. All this time, I had been watched. That's when I heard it again, the sound of footsteps, this time louder, coming from behind the employee's only door that led deeper into the back of the gas station. I didn't want to go, but something pulled me forward, like a moth to a flame. I grabbed the tire iron from my bag and pushed the door open with a trembling hand. Beyond the door, there was a narrow, dimly lit hallway that seemed to stretch on forever, the walls lined with old peeling wallpaper that seemed to writhe and twist in the flickering light. I stepped inside, feeling the floorboards creak beneath my feet. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and something else, something metallic. The hallway seemed to bend and twist, as if it were leading me somewhere specific. And then I saw it, a door at the end of the hall, slightly ajar, a faint light spilling out from within. I walked slowly, every nerve in my body screaming at me to turn back, to run. But I kept going, step by step, until I reached the door. I pushed it open, and my breath caught in my throat. Inside was a small room, no bigger than a closet. In the center was an old wooden chair, and sitting in the chair was a mannequin. It was dressed in clothes that looked strangely familiar, my clothes. It had a hat perched on its head, the same wide-brimmed hat I had seen on the figure in the videos. Its face was painted with a grotesque smile, wide and toothy, staring straight ahead. Pinned to its chest was a note, scrawled in the same jagged handwriting as the tapes. I leaned in closer, my heart pounding in my ears, and read, "You shouldn't have stopped." I stumbled back, knocking into the wall, my breath coming in ragged gasps. That's when I felt it, the cold grip on my shoulder again, firm and unyielding. I spun around, swinging the tire iron, but there was nothing there. Just empty space. And then from behind me a voice. Low, distorted, but unmistakable. "This is just the beginning." The door slammed shut, and the lights went out. The room was plunged into darkness, and I felt the cold breath of something just inches from my face. I didn't wait to find out what it was. I bolted, running blindly through the dark hallway, back toward the front of the gas station. I could hear the footsteps behind me, faster now, closer, chasing me through the dark. I burst through the front door, the rain hitting my face like ice. I sprinted to my car, jumped in, and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I slammed the gas pedal to the floor, speeding away from that cursed place as fast as I could. In the rearview mirror, I could see the gas station growing smaller, the neon open sign flickering madly. And then, just before it disappeared from view, I saw him, standing in the doorway, that same hollow smile on his face. I didn't stop driving until I reached the highway, the city lights finally appearing in the distance. I pulled over, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I could barely breathe, barely think. I don't know what I expected to find out there, but I got more than I bargained for. Much more. And now, as I sit here in the safety of my apartment, I know one thing for sure. Whatever this is, it's not over. Not yet. And the worst part is, I don't think it ever will be. I stayed locked in my apartment for days after that. Every sound, every creak of the building settling, every flicker of the lights made me jump out of my skin. I didn't go to work, didn't answer my phone. I just stayed there, staring out the window, waiting for something, anything, to happen. I knew I couldn't hide forever. Whatever was out there wasn't going to just go away. It was a relentless, unseen presence, something I could feel in my bones. I thought about leaving town, maybe even starting over somewhere far away, but something told me it wouldn't matter. You can't outrun what you can't see. Then, on the fourth day, there was a knock at my door. 3 sharp knocks. I froze, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would explode out of my chest. I crept over to the door, peering through the peephole. A man stood there. He was in his late 40s, clean-cut, with a serious expression. He held up a badge to the peephole, FBI. I hesitated, but then slowly opened the door, keeping the chain lock on. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice shaky. The man nodded. "I'm Special Agent Carter. I need to ask you a few questions about an incident on Route 6. I felt my blood run cold. What incident?" He shifted uncomfortably, glancing down the hall as if checking for something, or someone. "There have been reports of strange occurrences. People have gone missing. And you were seen near the location of one of those disappearances." My mouth went dry. "I don't know what you're talking about," I stammered, but I could tell he didn't believe me. Agent Carter's face softened a bit. "Look," he said, "I know you're scared. But if there's something you know, something you've seen, it could help us figure out what's going on. It could help us stop it." I hesitated for a long moment, weighing my options. Finally, I unlatched the chain and opened the door all the way. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. Agent Carter walked in, and I closed the door behind him. He took a seat on my couch, pulling out a small notebook. "Why don't you start from the beginning?" he suggested. So I did. I told him everything, about the road, the gas station, the tapes, the figure in the rain. His expression remained neutral, but I could see a flicker of recognition in his eyes. When I finished, he was silent for a moment, tapping his pen against his notebook. "There have been others," he said finally, almost to himself. Others who have seen things out there. Heard the voice, seen the tapes. But you're the only one who made it back. I felt a chill run down my spine. What do you mean, the only one? Agent Carter looked me straight in the eye. Everyone else who's seen what you've seen has vanished. No trace, no explanation. Just gone. I swallowed hard. So what do we do? He took a deep breath, closing his notebook. There's a team on its way here now, he said. We're going back to that gas station. We need to find out what's really happening out there. And you're coming with us. I felt a wave of fear, but also a strange sense of relief. Maybe with backup, with people who knew what they were doing, we could end this nightmare once and for all. Okay, I said. Okay, I'll go. We waited in silence for what felt like an eternity. Finally, there was another knock at the door. Agent Carter stood up and opened it, revealing 2 other agents, armed and wearing tactical gear. We're ready, one of them said. Let's move. The drive back to Route 6 was tense. The agents didn't say much, just exchanged quick, meaningful glances. I rode in the back of their SUV, gripping the edge of the seat, feeling the anxiety build with every mile. We arrived at the turnoff just as the sun was setting. The same faded sign stood there, turn here. The road seemed darker than before, the trees thicker, the air heavier. The agents exchanged nods, and we drove down the narrow road, deeper into the darkness. When we reached the gas station, I could feel my heart pounding in my throat. The sign was still flickering, the neon open a sickly, unnatural glow in the twilight. The agents got out first, scanning the area, guns raised. I followed, my hands shaking. We made our way inside, and Agent Carter motioned for me to stay behind. The other 2 agents moved through the aisles, checking every corner, every darkened shadow. They reached the employees' only door and opened it cautiously. That's when the lights went out. The gas station was plunged into darkness, and I could hear the agents cursing, fumbling for flashlights. I felt a familiar dread settle over me, and then, the static. The low hum of static, growing louder, filling my ears, my mind. And then, from somewhere deeper in the gas station, that voice. You shouldn't have stopped. The agents froze, shining their flashlights wildly around, but there was nothing, just shadows dancing on the walls. And then, one by one, their flashlights began to flicker, then go out. I backed away slowly, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I could see the agents moving, their silhouettes barely visible in the dim light, and then I saw it, a figure moving toward them. The same figure in the wide-brimmed hat, his face obscured by the darkness, his smile somehow visible even in the pitch black. Agent Carter yelled, "Get back! Get back now!" But it was too late. The figure moved closer, faster than any human should be able to, closing the distance in a heartbeat. The agents fired their weapons, the gunshots deafening in the enclosed space, but the bullet seemed to pass right through the figure, like he wasn't even there. And then the room exploded with light. A blinding, white light that seared into my eyes, forcing me to look away. When the light faded, the figure was gone. The agents were standing there, stunned, their weapons hanging limply at their sides. Where did he go? One of them whispered, and that's when we heard it. The low, rumbling sound, like laughter coming from all around us. I turned toward the front door, and my heart dropped. The neon sign had changed. It no longer read open. Now it said, run. I didn't wait for the agents to react. I turned and bolted out the door, running faster than I ever had in my life. I could hear their footsteps behind me, but I didn't look back. I just ran through the rain, through the dark, back toward the road. I could hear the rumble of engines as I reached the edge of the woods. The agent's SUV was still there, and I jumped in, slamming the door shut behind me. I fumbled for the keys, my hands shaking, and finally found them in the ignition. I turned the key, the engine roared to life, and I slammed my foot down on the gas pedal. I sped down the narrow road, the trees blurring past me, the rain pounding on the windshield. I didn't stop, didn't slow down until I reached the highway, my heart racing, my mind numb. And then, as I finally started to feel like I was safe, I glanced into the rearview mirror. There he was. The man with the wide-brimmed hat. Sitting in the back seat, smiling. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a halt. I whipped around, but the back seat was empty. I turned back to the road, my breath coming in ragged gasps. And then I heard it, faint but unmistakable, coming from the radio. You shouldn't have stopped. I kept driving, faster, further, not knowing where I was going, just needing to get away. But no matter how far I went, no matter how fast I drove, I knew one thing for sure. I could never escape. Because some roads, once you take them, never let you go.